title fight to be decided on the final lap, under the lights, in the desert.
It's lights out, away we go, and Hamilton gets a decent start, and he's already ahead of Max Verstappen.
The reigning king versus the rising star. Equal points, equal pressure, one race to crown it all. But what actually happened in Abu Dhabi wasn't a movie. That was a full-blown fever dream, scripted by the FIA, directed by chaos, and ending in one of the most controversial final laps in sporting history. A lap that, by every measure, probably shouldn't have happened, but it did. And that ending, it broke the sport. But to truly understand why this ending shook Formula One to its core, you have to go back to where the war began. How did we get here? Before Abu Dhabi became the most talked about Grand Prix in Formula One history, there were two men with everything to lose and everything to gain. Coming into 2021, Lewis Hamilton stood at the very top of the sport. 7 world titles. Just one more away from setting the record of 8 titles, something that's never been done before. Just one more to become the undisputed GOAT. While on the other hand, in what many still call the most impressive rookie season ever, Max didn't just match expectations, he blew past them. Youngest race winner in F1 history, dominant in qualifying, 3rd overall in 2016, all before turning 19. Now at 23, sharper than ever, and with Red Bull finally giving him a title-worthy car, Max had a real shot. Not just at wins, but at legacy. Because if you could take Hamilton's crown in his prime, you hadn't just arrived, you'd taken a step closer to the throne. But heading into 2021, the real question wasn't who was the best driver. It was who had the better car. Most would say Mercedes. The title-winning machine was still an engineering masterpiece. And as long as Lewis did what he'd always done, drive flawlessly, history was his. But Red Bull had closed the gap. In fact, going into Bahrain, they were widely seen as having the edge, especially in qualifying. So for Max, everything had to be perfect. For Hamilton, everything had to stay perfect. From the very first race in Bahrain, they both made it crystal clear that the stakes were high. They raced wheel to wheel. They pushed track limits, and neither of them was backing down. Not in Bahrain, not in Imola, not in Spain. In fact, every single race felt like two gods colliding, and the calendar was their battleground. But then came Silverstone. Both Hamilton and Verstappen came head-to-head at the Copse corner.
This is the accident. Oh, and it was the merest of touches, but it was enough.
One of the fastest corners in Formula One. And Max didn't want to budge. Neither did Lewis. All of a sudden, contact. The Red Bull went flying into the barriers at 180 miles per hour, 51 G. A 300,000-strong British crowd roared as Hamilton took a now controversial win. While Hamilton celebrated his win, Max was on his way to the hospital. Red Bull were furious, and rightly so. Christian Horner called it dirty driving. Toto Wolff called it hard racing. The gloves were officially off. From that point on, things got personal. They clashed again in Monza. This time, it was Max's turn to stay committed. But it seems he was, well, too committed. The Red Bull launched onto the Mercedes and landed on top of Hamilton's car. Only the halo saved him. Otherwise, Hamilton's story could have probably been more deadly than that of Ayrton Senna. But there it was. 2 races, 2 crashes. 1 championship hanging in the balance. And it didn't stop there. Brazil, Saudi Arabia, every race was now laced with tension. Every overtake felt like a potential explosion. Double moves, brake tests, stewards meetings, endless team radios. At this point, it wasn't just about points, it was about pride. By the time they got to Abu Dhabi, both men had won 9 races each. Both were on 369.5 points. That had never happened before. It was perfect. It was poetic. But something was about to happen as the whole race was about to go completely off script. The final race of the season came down to Abu Dhabi at the Yasmarina circuit under the lights in the desert. What a season it had been so far. Hamilton had clawed back the title fight with one of the greatest drives of his career in Brazil. Max had led most of the season. defying the odds and fighting with the hunger of a man aching to make his own history. It was so close, it almost didn't feel real. They weren't just level on points, they were orbiting each other, locked in a season-long dogfight. The next closest driver, not even within 150 points. And now it would be settled in one final race. Hamilton started P2, but when the lights went out, he exploded off the line like a man on a mission. He launched past Verstappen before turn 1, took the lead, set the pace. But Max, he wasn't letting this story end that easily. Down into turn 6, Verstappen dived up the inside, a desperate, wild, all-or-nothing move. Hamilton took the escape road, rejoined ahead, and Red Bull immediately screamed over the radio, "Give the place back!" But the stewards decided no investigation necessary. They were just silent. Hamilton kept the lead, but just like that, the match had started with controversy. What followed was classic Lewis. Dominant, clinical, untouchable. He controlled the race, managed the tires, pulled away from Verstappen with every sector. By lap 40, Max was fading. Even a strategic Hail Mary from Red Bull, pitting for fresher tires, barely made a dent because Hamilton wasn't cracking. And with just a few laps to go, it looked like the story was set. Lewis Hamilton, 8-time world champion. Game over. But then, Nicholaslatifi crashed, and everything changed. When Nicholaslatifi hit the wall on lap 53, it was nothing more than a backmarker crash. But in that single moment, a championship flipped upside down. Debris on track, safety car deployed, and suddenly, the gap between Hamilton and Verstappen was completely erased. Max immediately dived into the pits for fresh, soft tires. Lewis stayed out. Track position was everything, and Mercedes were betting on one thing: that the race would end behind the safety car. Because, according to the FIA rulebook, if race control doesn't have time to safely restart the race, especially with lapped cars between the leaders, then the race ends under safety car conditions. The rules were clear, and yet, the rulebook was about to be thrown into the sun. So basically, what just happened is Red Bull pushed for a restart. Mercedes told Lewis to stay calm. And then came the line. The moment everything changed. Overtaking will only be allowed between cars that have been lapped by the leaders. Not all, just the 5 between Max and Lewis. Not all the lapped cars, not even the required full lap. Just 5. Just enough to clear Max's path to Hamilton. And then, one more line. The safety car is coming in this lap. What? This wasn't just controversial, it was chaos. Never before had a decision like that been made. The rule wasn't followed. It was invented. Red Bull were celebrating before the race even restarted. And why wouldn't they? Hamilton was still on his 40-lap-old hard tires. Verstappen, fresh softs. Behind him, in the DSR range, with 1 lap to go. Everything they fought for. 21 races of glory, pain, collisions, and controversy was now down to a single lap, a single decision, a single corner. If Formula One is a sport of fine margins, then this was the sharpest edge it had ever walked. Lap 58. 1 lap, 2 drivers, equal points. And one of them had a rocket ship strapped to his tires. The safety car pulled in. The crowd held its breath. And then, green flag. Hamilton defended the inside. Verstappen dived down anyway, a late lunge into turn 5, the kind you only try if you have nothing to lose and everything to gain. Lewis fought back on the exit, tried to keep his nose in, but Max had grip. Grip Hamilton could only dream of after 40 laps on hards. They charged down the back straight, DRS wide open. Hamilton tried once more, around the outside at turn 9. But there was nothing left. Verstappen had already pulled away. The title was slipping. The fairy tale was ending. Not in a blaze of glory, but in a boardroom blunder. As Max crossed the finish line, Red Bull erupted. Horner screamed, Joe swept, and in the Mercedes garage, silence. Max Verstappen, world champion, on a final lap in a race that should have been over, in a lap that, by the book, should have never happened. And Hamilton, he didn't even take off his helmet. The checkered flag had dropped, but the controversy had only just begun. Lewis Hamilton silent in the cool-down room.
Available for 2 laps after a safety car, so it's a straight fight down the...
Max Verstappen, celebrating the biggest win of his life. And everyone watching? Was it legal? Was it fair? Did the rules even allow that? Because let's be clear, the FIA didn't follow their own procedures. Only some lapped cars were allowed through. Not all, not none, just the 5 that happened to be between Hamilton and Verstappen. And then, boom, restart. It was a decision made in seconds that rewrote the championship. 1 lap of chaos that unraveled an entire season of control. Mercedes protested twice. Red Bull defended loudly. But the stewards, they stood by their decision. The final verdict was the result would stand. Verstappen was world champion, but the damage was done. The FIA launched an investigation, and eventually, Michael Massey lost his job because they did indeed discover that there was something foul at play. And new procedures were quietly introduced the following season to prevent this ever happening again. But nothing could undo Abu Dhabi 2021, because in the end, Formula One didn't just crown a champion, it created a crack in its own foundation, a crack still debated to this day. Abu Dhabi 2021 was supposed to be a celebration of one of the greatest seasons in F1 history. 2 titans, 1 title. And in a way, it was unforgettable, just not for the reasons anyone hoped. Because what should have been a triumph of skill became a controversy of circumstance, and what should have been an ending for the ages turned into a debate that still hasn't ended. Max Verstappen won the championship, but Lewis Hamilton never lost it, at least not in the eyes of many fans, not in the pages of sporting integrity. If you love Formula One and stories like this, hit subscribe. If you think this controversy was crazy, wait till you see the one on your screen right now.